Obviously, there are meta protocols out there that seek to tokenize on Bitcoin, and I think in terms of user experience, those projects like RGB and Taproot Assets make a lot more sense. But we still think that a sidechain is necessary to scale tokenization because with meta protocols like RGB and Taproot Assets, you still need to write inside of Bitcoin UTXOs and occupy space in the Bitcoin time chain, and we don't view that as viable in the long term.
Welcome back to another episode of Bitfinex Talks. I'm your host, Ricardo Martinez. Today, I am lucky enough to be joined by Andreas Kohl, who is the co-founder of Concatina Labs. And right now, they're working on a Bitcoin sidechain known as Sequentia. Andreas, how are you? Thanks for coming on the show.
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm really excited to talk to you, man. I ran into you at Plan B in Lugano. And we crossed paths, and you were telling me about your project, creating a Bitcoin sidechain, and I was super interested in it. So I'm excited to have you here to learn more about it. For those that don't know, can you give them a rundown of what Concatina Labs is and how you guys got started in working on Sequentia?
Sure. So Concatina Labs is a free and open source software development studio, specifically a Bitcoin development studio. The main project that we're working on at the moment is Sequentia. Sequentia is an idea that came about a few years ago. I think the original conception was back in 2019. It was designed by my co-founder Alberto De Luigi, who's a fairly well-known Italian Bitcoin blogger who was writing about the Lightning Network back in 2014 and probably one of the main resources, technical resources for Bitcoin in Italy at the time. And we managed to raise some funds earlier this year in January, which is when we really got started with building Sequentia. I mean, should I explain a little bit of what Sequentia is, what we're trying to achieve with it?
Yeah, that would be awesome.
Yeah, so Sequentia is the first Bitcoin sidechain that's optimized for cross-chain swaps between assets issued on the sidechain and actual real Bitcoin on the main chain or the Lightning Network. So whereas every other sidechain so far requires pegging or bridging or wrapping, whatever term you prefer, but basically representing Bitcoin on the sidechain, we believe that the Lightning Network is the ultimate solution for scaling Bitcoin payments. That or other real layer 2s, like there's ARC in development as well, which I think is got a lot of potential. But basically, we don't view sidechains as a viable solution for scaling Bitcoin payments. Obviously, there are meta protocols out there that seek to tokenize on Bitcoin, and I think in terms of user experience, those projects like RGB and Taproot Assets make a lot more sense. But we still think that a sidechain is necessary to scale tokenization because with meta protocols like RGB and Taproot Assets, you still need to write inside of Bitcoin UTXOs and occupy space in the Bitcoin time chain. And we don't view that as viable in the long term. Obviously, whenever you commit any sort of data to the Bitcoin block space that isn't just purely monetary settlement, you're competing with any monetary settlement, traditional Bitcoin transaction for block space. And if we envision a world where where capital markets are built on Bitcoin, where everything is tradable for BTC without any intermediaries, so global financial markets, that's probably not going to all fit inside of the Bitcoin time chain. So that's why we believe that a sidechain is necessary, but one that can give the user experience that's closer to what you get with Taproot Assets and RGB, i.e. a Lightning decentralized exchange, rather than forcing users to adopt a new form of Bitcoin like pegged Bitcoin.
Okay. Tokenization has been like one of the prevailing narratives of this market cycle. we've seen like institutional players like BlackRock express a lot of interest in the tokenization of real world assets. What potential do you see for tokenization, like moving forward?
Well, one caveat that I see with tokenization, before I talk about the good side of tokenization, I think it's important to note that I don't think that any investment that you can make today in any company or any bond or any financial asset out there will ultimately outperform Bitcoin. There might be some ways to outperform Bitcoin in the short term, depending on where we're at Bitcoin price action, but that's pretty much impossible to predict. And in the long run, as everything else gets demonetized and more value goes into Bitcoin, there's pretty much almost nothing out there that will outperform Bitcoin. However, I still think that it's important to make as many things directly purchasable for BTC. I think the more you can use Bitcoin as money, even in influent financial markets that are going to be outperformed by BTC, the more Bitcoin becomes money-like, and the better price discovery we have for all sorts of assets in the market and Bitcoin itself. Now, that being said, I think that there are some, especially over time, there are going to be more and more entrepreneurial opportunities that could exist in a Bitcoin standard that will track and even eventually outperform BTC. If you look at companies that are operating in a Bitcoin standard, i.e., use Bitcoin as their unit of account and try to stack more BTC than they have to spend, like for example MicroStrategy. I think that's maybe on the only example today. There are very few companies that can do what MicroStrategy can do in that aspect. But I do believe that there's going to be more and more of them as time goes on, and yeah, I think it's really important to make stocks of these companies as easily and frictionlessly tradable for BTC as possible, and that's what we're trying to do.
Okay, amazing. I want to go back to something you said just a few moments ago when you were talking about how other side chains use like a peg in, peg out mechanism. How is it that you guys are like standing apart and using like atomic swaps or however you guys are doing it? Can you explain how that works?
Yeah, so I can, maybe it's easiest if I tell you a bit about how we're building Sequentia, about the actual architecture behind it. We are a fork of Elements, which is the code base that powers Blockstream's Liquid network. So we're going to be very similar to Liquid. At least at the beginning. It might be that more and more differences stack up as time goes on. But in the beginning, we're essentially Liquid without LBTC. We're making two fundamental changes to Elements before we launch our mainnet. The first one is, as you said, removing the native peg in, peg out mechanism, what's referred to as the policy asset in Elements. We're replacing that not with a new coin or shitcoin that you might need to pay transaction fees with, but instead we're making it the first blockchain ever, not just sidechain, but the first blockchain ever that has no native coin for transaction fees, and which allows users to instead propose transaction fees using any asset that's issued on the sidechain, issued on Sequentia. So in a typical use case, you might receive some USDT in your wallet, and this is an all too common horror story that you hear in crypto. People get onboarded to crypto. They download their first wallet, usually on Tron or ETH, Ethereum, and they receive some stable coins. Maybe they're paid for some work they've done, and then they find out that they can't use those stable coins. They can't do anything with it because they don't have the gas asset. Then they need to make an account on a centralized exchange and acquire the shit coin. With Sequentia, you'll be able to propose a transaction fee directly in USDT or any other asset that you have in your wallet. Now, I say propose rather than pay because it's up to validators, block producers, to decide if they'll create a block with your transaction. And so if they consider your transaction fee asset valuable, But obviously with stable coins, that's always going to be, at least popular mainstream stable coins like Tether, it's always going to be really easy to pay for transaction fees that way. And with assets that are less liquid or more volatile, you might try to pay the transaction fee and see that no validator is including the transaction in a block. And after some time, you could simply do a replace by fee, like you can do today in Bitcoin. You can bump the fee, increase the amount that you pay, or even replace the fee asset entirely with a different asset. So it's going to be a free market between validators and users. There's going to be some price discovery there. I can't say exactly what the ultimate outcome will look like, except that I expect that that stable coins like Tether will be massively accepted by block producers, and other assets might require a slight premium to pay the fee asset with the fees with. So that's the first change that we're making to Elements, and that's actually already been done. We have a demo out, a testnet that proves our concept with this, and we also made a prototype Android wallet. We have a block explorer. Today we just finished the faucet, so pretty much anyone can just download our APK or even the node and try it out for themselves. The next thing that we want to change in Elements, and what really makes Sequentia a Bitcoin sidechain and makes these cross-chain swaps possible with Bitcoin, is a consensus rule that we're calling anchoring, that essentially requires every Sequentia block to have a reference to a Bitcoin block at an equal or greater height than the Bitcoin block referred to by the previous Sequentia block. And that sounds a little bit complicated, but essentially what it means is that both networks are always synchronized together. If Bitcoin reorganizes, Sequentia has to reorganize alongside Bitcoin, and it should never reorganize by itself otherwise. And the purpose of this is to have an implementation of atomic swaps between Bitcoin and Sequentia that doesn't require a lengthy time lock for reorg protection. Now, to give some background on this, atomic swaps are pretty old technology. They've been around for a very long time. The first cross-chain atomic swap, I believe, was between Bitcoin and Litecoin back in 2014. And so to give you a sort of visual example of how that works, I could send you some Bitcoin. I attach a secret to it, which you can only generate. So you can only unlock the Bitcoin that I've sent you if you send me the agreed amount of Litecoin on the Litecoin network. And if you don't send it within a certain amount of time, then I would be able to unlock the Bitcoin myself and take them back. Now, the problem with this type of atomic swap is that if you consider it finalized immediately, let's say one block on each network, you could find yourself in a position where the Bitcoin network reorganizes, the block where I sent you the Bitcoin is orphaned, and then I would have my Bitcoin back, but I would still have your Litecoin on the Litecoin network, because the networks aren't synchronized together. They don't know what's happening on each other. And so the only way around that so far with cross-chain atomic swaps has been implementing a time lock for reorg protection. And it really depends on your risk threshold. You might see implementations of it where it's 3 hours, 6 hours, 9 hours. But it ultimately is simply not useful for most users. Most people don't want to wait that long for their swap to finalize. So Sequentia, with being synchronized with Bitcoin, and guaranteeing that if in a swap the Bitcoin transaction disappears, the Sequentia transaction that corresponds to it would also disappear. You can now consider the swap immediately finalized relative to Bitcoin. There's no way of it disappearing just on one side, which means that we don't need that time lock for reorg protection. And this will also power a lot of other cross-chain, a lot more cross-chain interoperability between Bitcoin and Sequentia. With, for example, the Lightning Network, we can achieve something pretty close to what Taproot Assets has done with assets at the edges, where it's actually every Sequentia asset that's loaded into a Lightning channel of its own will be able to hop over Bitcoin channels and extend the liquidity of the Bitcoin Lightning Network, and it will be really easy to swap assets on Sequentia, whether or not they're in Lightning channels of themselves for Lightning Bitcoin. So if you have Bitcoin in a Lightning channel and you swap it for an on-chain asset on Sequentia, that would be a submarine swap, or you could do a purely Lightning swap if it's on Lightning on both sides. But you'll have all the options integrated into a single wallet, which first and foremost will be a regular Bitcoin wallet. So that's the important thing. You know, we are using the network effects of Bitcoin, of the Lightning network, rather than segregating and separating network effects like every pegged Bitcoin or bridge for Bitcoin does currently.
Okay, cool. That's super interesting. Thank you for giving us that explanation. You mentioned submarine swaps. We've seen Moon Wallet employ submarine swaps to interact with the Lightning network, but in high fee environments, like when there's a lot of competition for block space, we tend to see the fees become kind of unreasonable. Will Sequentia suffer from that issue by employing submarine swaps, like in a high fee environment on Bitcoin?
So the type of submarine swap that I was referring to right now is where you have Bitcoin already in the Lightning channel and you're trying to buy an asset on Sequentia that's not in the Lightning channel, that's simply on chain, and so the only fees that could be significant here are the on-chain fees on Sequentia. Now that depends on how much usage there is of the Sequentia blockchain, if the blocks are saturated or not. Initially, no, I don't think we will see that for a while. I mean, if you look at liquid blocks right now, they're pretty empty, and Sequentia will be pretty similar with a block every minute and much smaller blocks than Bitcoin, but such that if the chain was fully saturated, it would grow more or less at the same rate as Bitcoin itself. But once we do see saturation on Sequentia, then it will increasingly make more and more sense to use Sequentia assets over Lightning themselves. And one thing that helps here is that elements, so Liquid and Sequentia, has a few more opcodes than Bitcoin does at the moment. So you already have a form of covenants that exists on Liquid and will exist on Sequentia on day one, which means that you could also create large channel factories where users could be onboarded out of existing liquidity already on the Lightning network.
Okay, cool. And then with the shared lineage of like elements and Liquid and Sequentia all being very, very similar, are you guys going to have like a federation like Liquid does?
Initially, yes. I've even, I don't know if I should be saying this, but I've even talked to guys at Blockstream about potentially using the same federation. That could be a service that Blockstream provides to us. They would at the very least probably provide the HSMs, the hardware security modules, if we want to set up our own federation. There hasn't been a final decision on this on our side. We are still maybe 7 or 8 months away from launching our mainnet, depending on a few things like funding, but that's the initial plan. We will launch Sequentia with a strong federation. In the future, we would like to upgrade Sequentia, probably with a hard fork. It will definitely take a hard fork to open up the federation such that anyone could join it permissionlessly, rather than have to convince the majority of the federation members, as currently happens on Liquid. And well, we have one idea of how to do that, currently described in our white paper. I would say that it's not really set in stone. We're going to really just we're waiting to launch the mainnet before we reopen research and development on this side. But the best idea that we had so far, after looking at many different potential approaches, is a type of proof of stake. Which I know sounds really controversial and sounds alarm bells, but it would be very different from traditional proof of stakes. If you look at our white paper, what we describe at the moment is a proof of stake where, first of all, the token isn't used for transaction fees. Obviously, this is one fundamental aspect of Sequentia from day one. So end users would never really be concerned with the existence of this token. It would really just purely be a token that distributes and shares the rights to join the federation to collect fees. And the second thing is that we would use checkpoints in Bitcoin to prevent long-range attacks, so that even if you had a majority stake of the token, you wouldn't be able to roll back or change the history of Sequentia. Let's say the immutability of the chain would be secured by Bitcoin's proof of work, even if we do employ this proof of stake. But again, so this is kind of like a really high level idea that we came up with, that we're not entirely married to at the moment, but that we want to explore in the future after we launch Sequentia to try to make it a little bit more robust and less vulnerable to, let's say, state-sponsored attacks, like perhaps a strong federation might be.
Liquid is known for having confidential transactions, which Bitcoin has never implemented so far. Will Sequentia also have like that privacy component to it?
Correct. Yes. Actually, if you try out our testnet and demo at the moment, you'll see that all the inputs and outputs are blinded by default. You can obviously unblind them if you want to. The only thing that's always unblinded is the transaction fee, which in Sequentia reveals a little bit more information than it does on Liquid, because obviously you have many different assets that you can propose the fee with. But yeah, I think this is a really cool feature of elements of Liquids, and something that we want to keep in Sequentia.
For the tokenization aspect of Sequentia, I know with Liquid, they have like the ability to like whitelist, like who can invest for like regulated tokens and compliant tokens and stuff like that. Is Sequentia going to have something similar like that for like institutional players?
Yeah, again, I don't know how closely we'll end up working with Blockstream. Me personally, as CEO of the company and one of the co-founders of the project, I can tell you that I would personally really like to work as closely as possible with Blockstream. I mean, we're using their architecture, and we're very dependent even on future developments that they have planned for elements. So I could envision a future where Blockstream is still running the AMP service for assets on Sequentia. It'll be, I mean, they have all they have everything prepared for it. It would be very easy for them to just make a few small modifications to match the modifications that we've made to elements and continue running that service themselves. If they don't, then obviously we will have to do it ourselves. AMP isn't fully open source at the moment, but we could work out a deal where they share the source code with us, or we make something ourselves. But that's definitely a feature that will be very important on Sequentia, especially since security tokens are really the use case we're most excited about.
We've seen an explosion of Bitcoin L2s. Like, I think on the website L2 Watch, there's like over 100 different Bitcoin L2s that are currently in different stages of development. Are you guys planning on having any sort of interoperability or cross compatibility with any of these other L2s that are being built on Bitcoin?
Well, first of all, this is sort of a pet peeve of mine. I think that the term L2 is used way too vaguely and universally. I think that there's no useful definition of L2 that includes sidechains. So I don't view Liquid as an L2. I don't view Rootstock as an L2.
What criteria are you using? Like unilateral exit, like to determine?
Right.
Yeah.
So that's what I believe is the most useful definition of an L2. You need to have a non-interactive or unilateral exit back to the layer one. So for me, the only real L2s are the Lightning Network and Arc. And we definitely want to be completely compatible with both. Like I mentioned before, the ultimate use case for Sequentia is a Lightning DEX, Arc actually was first developed for Liquid, or implemented on Liquid. So I think it'll be really easy to have on Sequentia as well. And as for other sidechains, whether we see any interoperability, I don't see a convincing case for it at the moment. I think really our focus is on being the place where you want to issue your assets to be able to trade them for BTC, and we want to focus on interoperability with actual L2s, like I said.
Okay, understandable. Let's talk about this Lightning DEX. It sounds super interesting. Can you tell us about it?
Sure. Well, in principle, it's going to look very close to what you already see being developed for RGB and Taproot assets. I think there's LN-Fi on Taproot assets, which looks pretty interesting. And the main difference is, as I said before, these meta protocols that are implemented on Bitcoin depend on writing inside of Bitcoin block space. A lot of people mistakenly assume that you can issue an asset in Lightning. That's not possible with any known technology at the moment. I mean, Lightning isn't a blockchain, so there's no place for you to do an asset issuance inside of the Lightning network. It's not exactly how it works. So when you create an asset on Taproot assets, for example, you're going to need to write inside of a Bitcoin transaction. There's actually 3 cases where you must commit data to Bitcoin transaction, even if you assume that a Taproot asset is going to be mainly transacted over Lightning, or that most Taproot assets are going to be transacted over Lightning. You still need to write inside of a Bitcoin transaction whenever you issue or reissue, in the case of a supply extension, the asset. Secondly, when you open, close, or manage a Lightning channel. Mm-hmm. That's also going to require writing inside of Bitcoin transaction. And the third case is for any asset that doesn't have enough liquidity or enough adoption to be transferred over Lightning in the first place. Those less popular assets will always require on-chain transactions. Now, even if you envision a future where there's a lot of transaction batching, where a lot of people coordinate to join all of those transactions together, a global financial market with constant new issues of new assets and lots of small assets that do have a niche user base of people that want to trade them. It's simply not going to be viable to write commit all of that data inside of the Bitcoin blockchain. So we essentially have a separate block space that's dedicated only to tokenized assets, which doesn't have to compete with Bitcoin transactions. But otherwise, the implementation of these DEXs is very similar, and the anchoring between Bitcoin and Sequentia allows you to have HTLCs, hash time lock contracts between both chains that essentially work the same way as if they were on the same network, because of this consistency and the synchronization between the two networks.
You mentioned that like tokenized securities is kind of like your focus. Are you guys like envisioning more like institutions issuing assets, or do you also see like like a church group or like a community center like issuing their own assets as well, like for smaller use cases?
Yeah, well, obviously we're not going to be putting any barriers to asset issuance. We're just building the infrastructure, and people can use it however they want. And we might even see use cases that will surprise us that we weren't expecting when we built Sequentia. But I think Sequentia think Sequentia makes the most sense is in cutting edge jurisdictions like El Salvador with their digital asset law. Which, by the way, Concatina Labs helped translate, made the first unofficial English translation of the law. Nice. And rather than small church groups, I think that both large and small and medium enterprises that are looking for funding or liquidity specifically from Bitcoiners, and therefore have an offering that's appealing to Bitcoiners in the first place, is probably going to be the most obvious use case, for the one that makes the most sense. So again, companies that can use Bitcoin as a unit of account and can offer goods and services that Bitcoiners find valuable and are willing to exchange their Bitcoin for. I think those are the ones that are going to make the most sense, and the ones that will be the most successful are the ones that can find some way to accumulate more Bitcoin than they have to spend in their business endeavors. Now, that's not a very obvious. It's not a very obvious thing to do today. I think, like I said before, and I think that MicroStrategy is one of the only, or maybe the only company that has we figured out a way to do this so far. But as time goes on, I think we're going to see more and more companies like that emerge, and hopefully, especially out of places like here in El Salvador.
Yeah, I think it's already started, to be honest, because there's like a Japanese telecommunications company that I saw that issued a press release about how they were going to start a Bitcoin treasury. Tether is also accumulating Bitcoin every month, our sister company. And then I've seen like a couple other announcements from random companies like here and there. So like I think the dominoes are like starting to fall in that direction already. So it's interesting that you mentioned El Salvador's digital assets law. You're based in El Salvador, correct?
Yeah, I've been living here for the last 3 years.
Nice. How do you like Bitcoin country?
It's amazing. I mean, it's the only place where you can really live on the Bitcoin standard. See, not every place accepts Bitcoin yet, especially smaller merchants haven't made the move. But you can live only on Bitcoin without getting too much out of your way. And I myself pay for my rent, my groceries, my utilities, everything in BTC on Lightning. So yeah, I feel like I'm living in the future.
Yeah, I bet, man. I've been there like 3 times, and it always blows me away. Like, because the first time I went there, like there was a little bit of adoption, and then the next time I went there was more adoption, and it seems to be just going in that direction. With the digital asset security law in El Salvador, we've seen Bitfinex Securities like start to release some tokenized securities. Is there traction on the ground and like interest from other Bitcoin startups that have come to El Salvador to set up shop?
Yeah, totally. Actually, I was just talking to some guys yesterday from Sovereignty Studios. They are planning to launch a security token. There's this airport near the hotel that did a tokenized bond as well. I think that was with Bitfinex Securities, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
And there's also another company called eNor Securities, and they're doing tokenized commodities, soybean, maize, I think, and they have a few others on the way. So those are the ones I'm aware of. Obviously, there's also the famed volcano bond that we're all waiting on. But I think there's going to be a lot more, and I personally would like to have a role in encouraging that and getting more people on board with using the law, hopefully using Sequentia.
With tokenized securities in El Salvador, like with these emerging like capital markets that El Salvador is trying to build, do you expect to see like more and more companies like coming to El Salvador? I know right now it's been primarily Bitcoin companies, but do you expect to see companies from all industries like coming to El Salvador to take advantage of
Totally. Even as far as I know, you don't even the physical assets don't even need to be in El Salvador for you to tokenize them here. So yeah, I envision people coming to use the law, and for other countries to pass similar laws. Liechtenstein did something like this many years ago already. I think they were one of the pioneers, and I also played a hand there. But yeah, there's also the Astana financial zone in Kazakhstan that's going in that direction. So yeah, I think that right now El Salvador has an edge, especially because of its reputation and really good marketing. But this is something that's going to become a global phenomenon.
I think so too. What are your thoughts on the recent U.S. elections and Trump as like all in his campaign? He was saying a lot of pro Bitcoin and pro digital asset rhetoric. Do you expect that to kind of legitimize digital assets worldwide?
Yeah, it could. I think something that's way more pressing and important for this to be possible, though, is obviously getting rid of the capital gains tax on Bitcoin transactions in the US. There's some talks that people, Michael Saylor said that, for example, that Trump is thinking about it. I don't know if those rumors are true, but I think this is the basic prerequisite for Bitcoin capital markets to be viable in the first place, because if you can't use it as money, then there's no capital markets to be built on top of it. But once those capital gains are abolished, then yeah, I see a lot of innovation could possibly come out of the United States, and it could really take the world by storm.
Okay. And say I'm like a company that's watching this right now, and I'm interested in possibly issuing a token on Sequentia. Like, what would that process look like? Like, how does one go about issuing a token?
Well, it's going to be very similar to issuing it on Liquid. And actually, any company watching this that wants to issue a token today, since Sequentia isn't live yet, I would recommend you to go to Liquid first. And obviously, this sounds a little bit ironic and play on words, but Liquid unfortunately doesn't have much liquidity yet. But if you issue your asset on Liquid, you'll be ready to move it over to Sequentia as soon as we're live. It'll be extremely easy to bridge it over or reissue it natively on Sequentia. So yeah, that's the direction I would recommend. There's very good companies that are already out there to help you with that, like Stalker or Digital, and yeah, I would really recommend working with them and getting started on Liquid.
Cool. And then, are you guys planning on working with companies like Stalker to like help companies like issue on Sequentia, like once you guys are live?
Absolutely, we would love to. I mean, it depends on them as well. We haven't really established contact yet, but if they're watching this, we totally want to work with you, and we want to make what you're doing a lot more powerful. I think with the liquidity of actual Bitcoin, especially Bitcoin on the Lightning Network, I think that the services Tucker are providing could really make a much bigger change in the world.
I guess I had another question about Sequentia. You mentioned that it's going to interact with the Bitcoin Lightning Network, but I think like Liquid also has a Lightning Network, and it's like separate from the Bitcoin Lightning Network, and then you can interact like across chains. Is that how Sequentia is going to work as well?
So there's an implementation of C Lightning that sort of exists for Liquid. I think it might not. It might not be working at the moment because there hasn't been much development effort on it in the last couple of years, but the Sequentia Lightning Network, by virtue of our anchoring consensus rule, will be really an extension of the Bitcoin Lightning Network. It will be able to work in conjunction, just like a Taproot asset that's loaded into Lightning channel today can make use of Bitcoin Lightning channels to spread liquidity.
Okay. And then apart from like issuing tokens and trading them on a Lightning DEX, are you guys planning on offering any other like DeFi use cases like lending or I don't know, like NFTs,
sure,
or like that kind of thing?
Sure. So again, we're just building the infrastructure, and we're not going to be offering any use cases ourselves. Most likely, we're just building the tools for other people to do that. But yeah, everything that exists currently on Liquid, there are also NFTs on Liquid, Rartoshi, for example. all of that will be on Sequentia, just with the ability to trade them for BTC, real BTC directly, and the ability to propose transaction fees in any asset. That's really the main two changes that we're making at the moment, and everything else that is currently feasible on Liquid, which is pretty much everything. Especially with the simplicity upgrades that's coming about us already on the Liquid testnet. I'm really excited about that as well. I think there's very little or even nothing at all that you can do on Turing complete environments like Ethereum that you can't do with simplicity on Liquid, and that you'll be able to do on Sequentia.
Is there anything that I haven't asked you about Sequentia that you feel is important for us to go over?
Well, no, not really. I mean, we're still a very small team, but we're looking to expand, especially when we secure funding. We're in the middle of fundraising at the moment, so I would just encourage any Bitcoin and even Liquid developers that are listening to this to take a look at what we're doing and see if you can contribute somehow. This is a totally open source and collaborative project, so we'll take contributions from anybody, and in the measure that we're able to, we'll compensate anyone for their contributions, whether or not they choose to dox themselves or contribute pseudonymously, if they want to just make a pull request on our GitHub, or if they want to work with our company. We're pretty flexible in that way.
Okay. And if someone did want to get involved, like how would they do so? Do you guys have like a GitHub or like a website or something that they can contact you through?
Yeah, absolutely. We have a GitHub, and we have a lot of socials, Discord, Telegram. All the links can be found on Sequentia.io. And if you go on GitHub, you can it's pretty open. You can make a pull request right away, and we'll look at it.
Okay, cool. And then for people that want to play around with it, you mentioned that the testnet is open and that there's a faucet. Like, where can they find those?
Yeah, I'm not sure if the link to the faucet is on the website yet. We'll do that today in the next couple of days. But if you go on testnet.sequentia.io, or if you go through our documentation, docs.sequentia.io, there's some instructions there on how to run the signet. If you go on sequentia.io/Ambra, AMBRA, that's our prototype Android wallet. Obviously, I know that it's safe, but I wouldn't recommend that anyone just downloads a random APK from the internet and onto their phone. But if you have an Android emulator or some virtual machine that you can run it on, you can try out the Android wallet. If you can't find the faucet, you can always message us on socials, place your address, and we'll send you assets. But the faucet should be working already, I think.
I know this is a long way off probably still, but will the mobile app have like all the functionality that like the desktop version does?
Yeah, absolutely. So right now on the mobile app, you can already propose transaction fees using any asset on Sequentia. We will in the future integrate a DEX into it once we're done with the anchoring rule. And so you'll be able to swap Bitcoin for assets on Sequentia. At the moment, you can already use our Android wallet as a testnet Bitcoin wallet. It's connected to a Bitcoin testnet as well, the Sequentia testnet. Although right now you can't really interact between assets and Bitcoin. The one thing that is sort of cool, even though we're not the first ones to do this, is that the seed phrase that generates your Sequentia keys is the same seed phrase that generates your Bitcoin keys, BIP39 seed phrase. So you can use the same phrase for both networks, and hopefully we'll see more wallets be developed for Sequentia. I mean, Ambra is sort of our proof of concept, where we show what Sequentia can look like in an ideal implementation. But I foresee that many existing liquid wallets and even other Bitcoin wallets that haven't looked at assets yet might expand to include Sequentia. I would be really excited to see Aqua use Sequentia, for example. They already have some form of fee abstraction, so I see that they're going in a pretty similar direction in terms of user experience. Except obviously you can't you can abstract the complexity, but you can't take it away entirely. So there's always someone that has to pay the LBTC for any transaction that you make on Aqua, even if the user doesn't need to have the LBTC. So again, removing that complexity in the underlying infrastructure will make Sequentia a lot cheaper to use for users, and so I think this is a pretty attractive offering for Aqua and other existing liquid wallets.
Okay, and then my final question is, you mentioned like RGB and Taproot assets. If somebody creates an asset on one of those protocols, is there going to be a way to like bridge it over into Sequentia?
Yeah, we plan to make the tools available for people to bridge those assets. It's not something that we're going to do ourselves, but we will make the tools available for anyone that wants to do that. Even RGB and Taproot assets, I should specify, are technically chain agnostic protocols. So you could technically even run them over Sequentia. Like there has been an implementation of RGB that runs over Liquid. I don't know how much sense it ultimately makes to do that, since Elements has its own tokenization protocol built in. But again, we're building the basic infrastructure to empower builders, but we don't know what the final outcome will look like. Maybe people will prefer to use RGB over Sequentia rather than the built-in tokenization of Elements.
Okay, and then I guess one more question. I know I said the last one would be my last one, but what's the response that you've gotten from the Bitcoin community to Sequentia?
Well, I so far not so much, simply because we're still a little bit under the radar. I wouldn't say stealth mode anymore, because we have active socials and we've been talking about what we've been doing pretty openly. But I think that few people have really heard about us so far. People that we've talked to at Blockstream seem to like the direction that we're going. We've got some good praise from Adam Beck himself, if I may say so. We also showed a few other people like Giacomo Zucco, who found what we're doing interesting, I believe. I don't want to put words in their mouth. I think when there's more conversation happening around Sequentia, they'll probably make their opinions heard themselves.
Well, Andreas, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been very, very enlightening to talk to you about what you're working on, and I'm super excited for you guys, and I wish you the best of luck.
Thank you very much for having me, Ricardo.